I call members to order. The first item on our agenda this afternoon is questions to the First Minister, and the first question is from Bethan Syed.
First Minister make a statement on the support for Welsh women affected directly by the spy cops issue.
Well, it is important that the women affected by this issue receive the help and assistance that they need. I understand that the inquiry that the UK Government has put in place is not due to report until 2023.
Thank you for that response. The reason why I was asking this question was because I think that it's important that the Welsh Government reaches out to some of the women from Wales that have been directly affected by this operation STS unit within the police that did infiltrate activist groups, and then clearly those police officers acted inappropriately with those women. Lisa was with Mark Stone. She discovered this in 2010. He was an undercover policeman called Mark Kennedy, and Rosa, an anti-racist campaigner who had a relationship with Jim Sutton, Jim Boyling, who had 2 children with her. 8 women are taking action, and we have an event tonight in the Pier Head with these 2 women involved. I'm asking what you can do as a government to support these women in this public inquiry to make sure that nothing like this ever happens again to Welsh women, so that they're violated in this way, and how can we go about changing the practices within the police so that we ensure that if they do need to go undercover, that it is done in an ethical and an appropriate way.
Can I first of all congratulate the member for hosting tonight's event and raising a very important issue that I suspect many members of the public are still not yet aware of. Now, it's some time, 5 years it seems, before the report will be prepared. In the meantime, however, it is important to provide services to those who have been affected. What I can say is that we do fund, of course, the Live Fear Free helpline, which is managed by Welsh Women's Aid. Those contacting the helpline will be listened to, believed and offered help and support. It provides support and advice to victims of violence and abuse, as well as their friends and relatives and practitioners. So the support is there, but it is hugely important, of course, that when the inquiry reports, that it does make robust recommendations to ensure that unacceptable practices are not repeated.
Mark Isherwood.
Diolch, Llywydd. The terms of reference for the undercover policing inquiry, which I think was launched in 2015 by the then Home Secretary, says the investigation will include but not be limited to whether and to what purpose, extent and effect undercover police operations have targeted political and social justice campaigners. It makes no explicit reference to the many women deceived into sexual relationships by undercover police officers. What, if any, representations has the Welsh Government made to the inquiry on behalf of women in Wales who were exploited in this way? Or, if not, are there, or can you explain what limitations on the Welsh Government's intervention there might be in this respect?
Well, this ultimately is a matter, of course, for the UK Government, although it is taking a great deal of time, I have to say. In March 2015, as the member rightly says, was when the inquiry was announced. It potentially would take 8 years before it actually reports, for reasons which are not clear. The inquiry itself will be looking at the deployment of police officers in undercover roles. It has been established following the controversy surrounding the conduct of undercover officers. Now, the inquiry will make, I understand, recommendations as to how undercover policing is conducted, and will scrutinise the use of undercover officers by the now defunct SDS and National Public Order Intelligence Unit. Now, among the allegations, of course, that undercover officers took fake identities from dead children, had relationships with campaigners and fathered children. Those are on the record. It would strike me as hugely difficult to understand if the inquiry itself did not also look at those issues in order to provide a comprehensive report.
Question 2.
Question 2, Rhina Bjorwerth.
Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement on Glastir grant payments?
Wedi'u darparu.
The Welsh Government has delivered Glastir payments to claimants in a timely manner and done so consistently to date. Over £39 million has been paid to Welsh farm businesses during this year. Further Glastir small grant windows will open this year and in 2019 to promote the restoration and creation of vital habitats.
Thank you for that response. I have spoken to a number of farmers and representatives who have been assisting them in making applications for the small glassdir grants, and that as a result that payments were taking a long time to arrive. The response I've had from the government is that the payments aren't late, and technically that is correct because no time limit is set in terms of how much time after application is made that payments are to be made. Now, especially after a hard winter, cash flow is important for farmers. Will you, as First Minister, consider introducing guidelines in terms of setting time scales in order for farmers to expect when they can expect a payment?
I can tell the member that European Commission regulations were recently changed in order to ensure a window in terms of payments, and that means that glassdir payments will be made between the 1st of December this year and the 30th of June next year. For the first time there'll be a window, and during that window farmers can expect payments. Russell George.
What other schemes are available to help farmers improve environmental, bring forward environmental schemes on their farmland other than the glassdir scheme?
Well, farmers of course can look at schemes such as the existing agri-environment schemes. There is a small grant scheme of course that members will be aware of. Also, of course, Farming Connect, which can help farmers to become more sustainable in terms of their businesses. So there are a number of options available for farmers in order to make their practices more sustainable and, of course, to make their businesses more sustainable.
Questions now from the party leaders. Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Yesterday, your Labour government backed Westminster's multi-billion-pound investment in a polluting new runway in the southeast of England. Do you stand by that decision, considering on the same day Westminster cancelled a clean, green, renewable energy project in Swansea?
I'm not responsible for the way votes go in Westminster, as I've said many, many times, but I do share her very great concern, that's probably an understatement, with the failure to go ahead with the Swansea Bay Tidal Lagoon. It is a huge disappointment for the Swansea Bay area. And it's a disappointment that's shared, in fairness, by Conservatives as well in this chamber. They've expressed that great concern. It's a shame the UK government didn't look at this in a far more rounded way. The fact that the project would have lasted a century, the fact that it would have created jobs, not just in the short term, but potentially in the long term as well. It would have created a technology we could have exported around the world. Now others will steal a march on us. It is hugely important that the UK government doesn't give the impression, which it has done now, that nuclear and offshore wind seem to be the only options for energy generation in the future. We have, around the coast of Wales, particularly but not exclusively in the Bristol Channel, one of the highest tidal reaches in the world. The fact that it's not being harnessed is a sign that the UK government sees Britain as being a boring and backward place, and not one that's bold and bright and wants to go forward developing new technology. It's a huge shame for so many people in Swansea Bay and beyond.
First Minister, the contradiction in all of this is shocking. Any government that is serious about tackling climate change cannot seriously take such contradictory positions as this. Not only do we see Heathrow being built, new nuclear to be funded by the taxpayer at the same, if not higher rate than the stated cost of the tidal lagoon. Now, First Minister, I acknowledge that the Welsh Government has made an offer of financial support for the tidal lagoon, but that wasn't enough. Now we need action and not offers. The window of opportunity is small, but I believe that the Swansea Tidal Lagoon project can still be saved. So will you now keep hope alive by honouring Labour's manifesto commitment to set up a national, publicly owned energy company to take over and progress this project?
I mean, on a day when people in different parties have been united in expressing their concern at the UK government's decision, Plaid Cymru start moving the blame elsewhere. I mean, there is a fair question, and that is, well, what plans do you have for the future? And that's a fair question. But today, what I have to say is that Wales has been let down by a decision of the UK government in London. That's what's happened. we cannot fill in the gaps that they have left. They are responsible for that. They are the ones who have to explain what they have done to the people of Swansea, and we will continue to press them. Now, in the future, what plans can there be for other projects that we will look to support? Of course, the door is open. Of course, that's something that we want to do, because we believe that there is a huge potential on the coast of Wales in terms of energy generation. What we cannot do, however, is fill in enormous gaps that are left by the UK government and the UK government's responsibility. Surely she will join me today in expressing her great concern at the way this has been dealt with by the UK government. 18 months of delay despite the Henry review. The fact that this would have been a game-changing project for the whole of Wales and indeed for the world, and that will not now happen because of the actions of the UK government.
So you're just going to wring your hands. You're not even going to bother trying. And remember, you promised in your manifesto that you would set up an energy company, and that could, if you were prepared to look at it, progress this project. First Minister, railways not electrified, lagoons not built, Airbus not investing. It's clear that the Secretary of State is Westminster's voice in Wales and not Wales's voice in Westminster. First Minister, Airbus employs around 7,000 people here in Wales, and their reason for reconsidering their investment in this country is our place in the single market and customs union. Now, I recognise that the First Minister may well say that he supports our membership of both, but the actions of his party indicate the opposite. Just a few weeks back, a majority of Welsh Labour MPs failed to vote on a crucial amendment that would have kept us in the single market. We now need clarity. Will you, First Minister, join with us in condemning your Labour MPs for supporting pulling Wales out of the single market and customs union, directly endangering those Airbus jobs?
This is like watching somebody playing darts and deliberately trying to aim at the wall to the side rather than the dartboard itself. On a day when people from different parties have expressed concern, in different ways, of course, they have to, according to which party they're a member of, but on a day where people have expressed concern at the decision of the UK government, Plaid Cymru have left them off the hook.
I'm asking you
on a day when blame should rest in the place where in Westminster where the decision has been made, Plaid Cymru are trying to turn this into an exercise in presenting themselves as being relevant, when in fact it is First Minister's questions. First Minister's questions doesn't involve answering questions about what happens in Westminster. That's one of the things that is absolutely clear. I am here to give the view of the Welsh Government. It's a matter of great regret today that as politicians from across Wales have expressed their concern at the decision taken by the UK Government, even those from within the Welsh Conservative Party have expressed their view that Plaid Cymru decided to let them off the hook.
Leader of the Opposition, Andrew David.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, last week the report into the tragedy at Gosport War Memorial Hospital came forward, and in particular the excessive use of opiate painkillers that potentially has led to the untimely death of at least 650 patients. Has the Welsh Government had chance to consider the report and the findings of that report and any implications for the Welsh NHS and changes that it might need to make?
We will, of course, consider any reports that are relevant to Wales, and many of the issues that arise elsewhere in the UK and beyond will inform our future thinking, and officials and the Minister will look at the report to see if there are any lessons that can be learned for Wales.
Thank you for that answer. I hope it will be a timely report back on that, because there are some very concerning aspects in relation to the circumstances around the premature deaths of the patients concerned. But one of the things that has come to light, certainly in press comment, is the use of Graysby's syringe drivers, which basically administer opiate painkillers, either over a 24-hour period or over an hour. Now, various safety notices have been put out over the last 20 years in relation to these instruments, and in Australia and New Zealand they were banned many years ago. The NHS was supposed to have withdrawn from service these syringes in 2015. Can you confirm today whether the NHS in Wales is still using these syringes, or is the Welsh Government still investigating this?
What I can say is, he's right with the media coverage of the syringes. The syringe drivers, which are called Graysby MS26 and Graysby MS16A, were loaded with capsules and programmed to release drugs into a patient's bloodstream over an extended period. They delivered drugs at different rates, and of course we know from the report that led to a dangerous overinfusion of drugs. Hazard notices were issued by the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency, MHRA, to ensure that NHS staff knew the difference between the models. This was also the subject of an England and Wales-wide National Patient Safety Agency publication, Rapid Response Report, in December 2010, which gave the NHS 5 years to transition to drivers with additional safety features whilst mitigating risk in the meantime. What I can say is that all relevant NHS Wales organisations have confirmed compliance with that patient safety requirement. We will be writing to health boards and trusts asking them to audit existing practice and to provide assurance that they remain compliant with this advice. And I understand that the same thing will be happening in England.
I'm grateful for that very detailed response, because the reports over the weekend would cause a huge amount of distress to families of bereaved relatives that might suspect some wrongdoing or some faulty equipment that might have caused an untimely death. What is important is if families do have those concerns, and the numbers we are talking about run into the thousands if you put it across the whole of the NHS, because these machines were used right across the NHS in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, that families can raise their concerns and ultimately have those concerns addressed. What action will the Welsh Government be doing to work with health boards so that families who do have those concerns, bear in mind you have confirmed that the Welsh NHS is compliant with the directive that ruled out their use up till 2015, but families will have concerns that need addressing. So how can families go about having those concerns addressed?
Well, if anybody has a concern, of course, they can raise that concern directly with the health board or with their constituency or their AM or indeed with the health minister. There's an outlet to do that. We're not aware of any concerns, but obviously it is right that there is an audit to make sure that the compliance is still there in the way that we would want. And that is the way we will seek to give assurance to both patients and their families across the NHS.
Leader of the UKIP group, Caroline Jones.
Minister, in the past few months have been brutal for the Welsh High Street, with many large retailers announcing closures of their stores. Mothercare is closing 50 stores across the UK, including its Newport branch. New Look is closing 60 stores, including its stores in Cardiff, Monmouth, Rhyl and Pontypool. Carphone Warehouse announced nearly 100 store closures across the country, and other retail giants like M&S are announcing closures and planning closures as well. And in the last week, we had the devastating news that one of the High Street's most iconic names, House of Fraser, was closing its stores in Cardiff and Cwmbran. So we've seen many high street brands disappear in recent times, and thousands of jobs have been lost. So, First Minister, the UK government are not appearing to address this issue, and some are calling this hell on the high street. So please can you tell me what your government, the Welsh Government, is planning to do to help halt this decline?
Well, retail is an important sector for us, so making it a priority. I'm not going to pretend that the challenges facing retail are easy, because they're not. There are many people who shop online. There are many people who go into a shop and then shop online, not shopping in the shop itself. And there are some challenges there. Where does the answer lie, I suspect? It's ensuring that our town centres are more mixed, making sure that more people live in town centres, and also ensuring that there are more offices. You know, I know from my experience in Bridgend, there's a lack of office space, and there's too much retail space. And what we need is to get the balance right, so that there's more good quality office space, creating then the footfall during the day for the shops that are there. So it's a question, I think, of rethinking what our town centres should look like, not seeing them purely for retail, but a far better mix in terms of what they offer and people living there and people working there.
I appreciate what you're saying, First Minister, but over the weekend, retail experts outlined the scale of the problem facing Wales department stores, following the announcement by the House of Fraser and the news of Chepstow's Herbert Lewis was to close. Howells has been on Cardiff's High Street since 1879 and will soon go the same way as David Morgan, which was the mainstay of Cardiff's retail experience for over 125 years. Herbert Lewis has been part of Chepstow's shopping experience for 140 years. The managing director of Newport's Wildings department store, which recently had to downsize, said the future was not good for traditional stores due to the rising costs and growth of online sales. So, First Minister, do you think it's time we took radical action, such as massively cutting business rates, in order to save Wales remaining retail icons?
It would take more than that. I think one of the issues that does need to be dealt with is we need to make sure that online retailers are paying taxes properly. The reality is that if you are a shop, you are paying business rates, so you might be competing with somebody who's paying next to nothing because they're online. And there are issues there which only the UK government can resolve. There have been issues that have been that have risen many times over the past few years. But that's where the level playing field has to be established. Simply saying, well, because an online shop is based outside the UK or subject to a more favourable tax regime, it's never going to work for the high street, if I can put it that way, or even for the bigger chains, if they're competing against online retailers who just don't pay the same tax as they do. And that's where I think the focus has to be.
Yeah. But we have to redress and look at the balance and have a level playing field. And unfortunately, according to Cardiff Metropolitan University's Business School, it is too late to save our traditional retailers. According to Chris Parry, Senior Lecturer in Accounting and Finance at Cardiff Met, the time to cut rents and rates was 2008, not 18. He said that the challenge for us is what do we do with our town centres and our high streets to look like that in 10 years' time? You know, what do we do with it? And that's something we need to urgently consider. So if the exponential rise in online sales continues, and we have no reason to believe that it won't, then by 2028, many of our traditional retailers will have disappeared. So, First Minister, we have to plan for that future. So Chris Parry said that if we sit and do nothing, our town centres may well be derelict wastelands in the next decade. So we have to avoid that at all costs. First Minister, what plans does your government have to accelerate mixed use of our town and city centres, replacing closed down stores with housing, restaurants, GP surgeries and everything else needed to true urban living?
I agree, and it comes back to the point I made earlier on. We do need, and planning guidance has been changed to reflect this, we do need to make sure that our urban centres are more mixed. Some of them are not. People have tended not to live in town centres for some time. We know that there are some businesses who will do well because they don't have online competition. You can't, if you're a cafe, there is no online competition. If you're a barber or a hairdresser, there's no online competition. There are some shops who have specialised particularly strongly in some products. They also perhaps have an online shop as well, which helps them to sustain their business. Ultimately, of course, it's a question that the problem is that people aren't going through the doors as they used to. They're looking elsewhere. How do we look to resolve that? Well, making sure, I think, as well, that people are around in the day. One of the issues is, to my mind, that many town centres, shops are open between 9:30 and 5:30, when most people are not around, in reality. And it's a question of looking again about flexible opening hours so that shopping centres are open, particularly in town centres, when people are actually out of work and back from work and able to shop, rather than having a model, which is a model really that hasn't really existed for 30 or 40 years, where people would go in and shop during the course of the day because perhaps they weren't in employment, in paid employment. Well, those days have changed, and I think it's important as well that the challenges that exist for the retail sector are met with looking at, as well at how can they become more flexible in order to cater for the fact that life has changed for most of their customers.
Question 3.
Question 3, Lee Watt.
What analysis has the Welsh Government undertaken of the opportunities outlined in the Institute of Welsh Affairs case study, Swansea Bay City Region, a Renewable Energy Future?
Look, and I welcome the recent report that IWER produced under their Re-energising Wales project on the potential for the region. It will be extremely valuable for us, and particularly for decision makers in the Swansea area, in order to inform the direction of the city deal.
Thank you, First Minister. Not content with cancelling green trains to Swansea and pulling the plug on subsidies for renewable energy, yesterday the Tory government pulled the plug on the tidal lagoon when their own former energy minister said it would be a no-regrets policy, and the Welsh Secretary had the brass neck to tour the TV studios and say the 30p annual subsidy was expensive when he's happy to subsidise Hinckley by £12 for every customer a year. So I think we should call out the hypocrisy of the Tories and the way they've led up investors up the garden path who are going to think twice about putting money into innovative technology again. But I think the message of the IWA report is there's still a possibility for us to lead the way in Wales, and it's for us as the Welsh Government to be at the front of that. The case study set out in detail how Wales can meet 100% of its renewable energy demand by 2035, just from green technologies. The city region leaders are supportive. Will the First Minister make sure the Welsh Government gives its full-throated support to this effort to make sure we still can be leaders in this field?
Yes, we've already done it, of course, in Pembrokeshire, particularly with the projects that we've supported there. I think the problem is that the mood music created around the announcement today is that tidal energy is too expensive. That's the message that's been given. Now, that will apply wherever potential investors are looking at tidal energy projects. If I was a tidal investor now, I'd start thinking twice about investing in the UK, because the UK government haven't given any encouragement to tidal energy. It's a matter of great regret. What they have said is, well, nuclear is there, and offshore wind, not onshore, but offshore wind is something they want to pursue. The message is that tidal energy is not seen as important by the UK government, and I regret that very much. Bear in mind that all we were asking for was the same financial deal as was offered to Hinkley. No more than that. We're asking for special favours beyond that. If the contract for difference was there in the same way as it was for Hinkley, I believe the lagoon could have moved forward, but the UK government did not accept that. And that is something I know that's a matter of regret, not just to members on this side of the House, but also to members in other parties as well.
Susie Davis.
Thank you very much. So it was my understanding that Ministers made it clear that the door was still open on tidal energy and future discussions on that. But let's talk about something that we can do something about more quickly, and that is rapid and fast electrical vehicle charging points. The same report mentioned that Wales is behind the rest of the UK in the number of charging points available, and suggested as a key action that increasing the number of charging points at major transport nodes, park and rides and tourist attractions. That should happen pretty quickly. Now, Swansea Bay City region, it's awash with these types of locations, and as the role of transport within the city deal area is something we're all talking about now, including local businesses. Can you tell me whether the money you've given for scoping out the South Wales West Metro includes perhaps increasing the number of electrical charging points in the Bay? And have you had any further conversations with Ford about whether they're considering electric car production within the South Wales West region?
Sorry, I missed the last point.
Oh, whether you've had any conversations with Ford about electric car production in South Wales West?
Well, there have been discussions with Ford on a number of potential opportunities. To my mind, the battery production is where the future lies. The technology is not far away when batteries will become far better used. I suspect that in terms of the step change will come if the day comes when people are physically able to take a battery out of the car that is discharged and then able to put one in that has been charged. So there's no delay in terms of the charge. We're a long way from that point at the moment because the batteries are huge. In terms of charging points, Tesla, of course, have invested heavily in charging points, but the reality is that there are very few Teslas on the road. There are charging points available in, I think, almost every service station at the moment as well. A number of retailers, like IKEA, for example, have charging points as well in their shops, and it is possible there is an app available that gives you an idea of where all the charging points are. So we want to roll out charging points across Wales. We know how important that is, and that is something that will be a priority for us as a government.
Di Lloyd.
Diolch, Llywydd. The Swansea Bay region certainly sets out an exciting vision of the region's energy future. Taking ownership and control is a theme which runs throughout that report, as you know, and it clearly shows that the growth of renewable energy projects in Wales are still dependent, to a large extent, on Westminster. And yesterday certainly proved that point as regards the tidal lagoon decision. And in view of your earlier comments to Llawn, we look forward to your full support tomorrow in the vote of no confidence in the Secretary of State for Wales. But notwithstanding, whilst the Wales Act does transfer some new powers to Wales for projects generating less than 350 megawatts, for example, do you now believe that Wales should, as Scotland has, have a greater influence over the strategy to develop offshore wind and marine energy technology, as well as setting subsidy levels and priorities for supporting community energy and energy efficiency schemes?
Yes, but we still wouldn't control the market. That's the issue, the GB energy market. We need to have a government in London that sees renewable energy as important and is willing to make the investments in renewable energy that are going to be needed for the future. That is not the case at the moment. What we've seen over the years is solar panels having the subsidies removed, same for onshore wind, and now what we have is a situation where the UK government has limited itself to a small number of ways of generating energy. They need to be more expansive than that and be far bolder in terms of supporting projects like the tidal lagoon.
Question 4.
Question 4, Simon Thomas.
What steps was the Welsh Government taking to support the hydrogen economy in Wales?
Hydrogen has a potential to, in terms of power, transport and heat, it has the potential to play an important role. Several Welsh Government initiatives are exploring hydrogen opportunities in Wales to improve our understanding of its potential.
Thank you for that response. But 8 years ago, Peter Hain and Jane Davison announced that the M4 would become a hydrogen highway for Wales. And by now, for 2 years, in fact, there would have been a list of places where hydrogen could be stored and used as part of decarbonised transport. We haven't seen that dream realised, and we've seen virtually no progress over the past few years in developing the potential of hydrogen, given what we've been discussing in terms of decarbonising the Welsh economy. And this is technology devised in Wales, where research is currently happening in Baglan and elsewhere, where there is a golden opportunity for the Welsh Government not only to lead in Wales, but also to lead internationally. Will you take that opportunity to be, as you said to Leanne Wood, bold and brave?
We are, and a reference group has been established to lead the way we think about hydrogen, ultimately. It has been ensuring that resources are available to show how the technology will work. We commissioned a study to look at opportunities with hydrogen in Rhondda and Taf 2 years ago, and recommendations of that report are being supported at the moment to see how they will work. To help, we're helping Monmouthshire Council to look at opportunities, for example, to build River Simple, which is an application happening in their area, looking at sustainable fuel and, of course, looking at how that will happen. £2 million has been given to River Simple, so that shows our support in terms of supporting the low-carbon economy on a local level. And, of course, we're working with Pembrokeshire Council on Milford Haven Port in order to develop a zero-carbon area in the Milford Haven area. So quite a number of things are being supported up to now. And, of course, there's a lot of potential available, and we're also conducting research. Saer Cymru is also funding research in Swansea University on the use of hydrogen in vehicles, and Cardiff University is also looking at research in terms of technology to create green hydrogen in the end.
Mr Minister, there have been concerns expressed from some quarters that we may be putting all our eggs in the electric basket and the electrification basket in terms of rail and cars, at the very point where some countries are moving fast towards a hydrogen economy. I suspect that over the medium term it will be a mixture of both that will provide the carbon reductions that we need. Will you undertake that you will look in the first instance for exploring the potential for hydrogen fuel on both freight, railways and buses? I think it was Simon Thomas who mentioned the M4 as a potential hydrogen highway. And looking beyond that, clearly we are moving down the line of electric vehicles at the moment. There are all sorts of issues for providing electric charging points in the early days of electric cars, and there are still some issues there. In the future, hydrogen cars might be much more of a reality. Have you done any provisional work in terms of developing our highways, developing the infrastructure for a potential hydrogen future, not just in the case of trains, but also in the and buses, but also in the case of cars as well?
Well, if I remember rightly, the hydrogen fuel cell was invented in Wales. So in some ways, we've stolen a march there. We must make sure that we continue to be in the forefront of this technology. We did look at the option of hydrogen technology with the train bidders during the procurement process. That wasn't something that we could take forward at this stage, but we'll continue to look at how the network can innovate in the future. If we look, for example, at the research, I made reference earlier on to the research work at Swansea University and Cardiff University, looking at how we can develop hydrogen in the future as well. It's hugely important for us to be ahead of the game in Wales in terms of the scientific research. I think there are great opportunities there in the future in terms of developing hydrogen as a fuel. And he will be aware, of course, of River Simple, the project, the trial that took place in Monmouthshire. Again, it's a question of supporting the research and supporting the trials to move the technology forward, and we'll continue to do that.
Question 5.
Question 5, Neil Malcolm.
Llywydd, will the First Minister provide an update on the implementation of local development plans in South Wales Central?
There is complete coverage of local development plans in the South Wales Central region. The implementation, of course, of local development plans are the responsibility of each respective local planning authority.
Diolch. I didn't really expect a proper answer, so I'm going to give you an update on the LDP in Cardiff on behalf of residents, because your local development plan is bringing absolute chaos. Traffic jams already go on for miles, and yet there will be over 10,000 extra cars on those roads already rammed. There's no new infrastructure in place, no new public transport, and communities will be suffocated with dirty and polluted air. GP surgeries are about to have thousands of extra patients when they are already at breaking point. New places will not be provided in doctors' surgeries or hospitals until 3,000 houses are built. You denied announcing that all this would take place. Your councillors stood in green fields, pledging to protect them. Those very same green fields are now full of bulldozers. Do you accept that you and your party have a very strange relationship with the truth?
Sorry, I don't know what the allegation was there.
Well, if you fail to understand the allegation, then you can't answer the question. Yeah, thank you. Andrew Davis.
First Minister, in relation to developing LDPs, it is really important that obviously councils and local people's voices are heard in the process. There does appear in the current system to be a disconnect with the ability for local people to feel they're having influence in the development of LDPs. And I appreciate that's a responsibility for local authorities, but ultimately the Welsh Government signs those LDPs off. Where do you think real improvements can be made in the process so that local communities do not feel that they are excluded from the development of plans that are supposed to govern the development of their own communities?
I think what's key is that people are involved in the LDP development process at the start. He will know, I'm sure, and I've had the same experience, where people will object to a planning application when, in fact, the land has already been allocated in the development plan for a particular purpose, at which point, of course, it's too late in the day in order to bring forward the objections that they would want. So I would expect local authorities to be fully engaged with the local community in the development of a local development plan. But it is hugely important now that we move on to strategic development plans. One of the issues that is correct in Cardiff is that Cardiff's a popular place to live. There is a need for more housing, otherwise house prices will go up to a point where people will be forced out of the city in order to live. There are real challenges in terms of infrastructure, that much is true, which is why it's hugely important that in the southeast of our country that we see the development of a strategic development plan that looks at a much larger area, rather than thinking that local authorities can only look at their own areas when it comes to setting out a development plan. It's not how the economy works, we know that, and that's where the next stage of planning must go.
Hefin David.
I agree with the First Minister. I think strategic development plans are the answer, and I'd go further to say that LDPs fail to deliver within their boundaries in areas like South Wales Central, and those authorities that stand against it then find themselves victim to speculative planning applications, which inspectors overturn democratically elected councillors on appeal, which is why I would praise the Welsh Government for its proposal to temporarily disapply paragraph 6.2 of TAN 1, the advice note to the planning inspectors, relating to the provision of the weighting of a 5-year housing land supply. However, and I've written my own response to the consultation supporting it. However, I was disappointed to receive a letter recently from the Home Builders Federation, which went to other Assembly members, opposing the Welsh Government's plans. I feel that the Home Builders Federation are far too keen to support the cartel of large house builders and the planning system is stacked in their favour, and they deliver barely any affordable housing. I think the Home Builders Federation need to rethink their position. Would the First Minister agree that we need to look at how we develop small and medium-sized house builders who have far more focus on their local communities and the needs of the market? And will he stand firm against lobbying groups who have vested interests?
It's hugely important that we have a planning system that works as effectively as it can. He's right to refer to the consultation that's taken place on the disapplication of paragraph 62 of TAN 1. We're considering the evidence of that now. But there is here a responsibility on local authorities as well, because it is important that local authorities agree governance arrangements to move on rapidly to progress the strategic development plan. The difficulty is, of course, that local authorities will look at producing a development plan for their own areas. The reality is people will live in their area and work somewhere else. And if you look at my own constituency, many thousands of people work in Cardiff and happen to live in Bridgend. To suggest that somehow you can have a development plan in Bridgend that's wholly separate to that of the Vale of Morgan or Cardiff really doesn't work, because in reality it's one large area. So it is important now. He will know the pressures, of course, in Caerphilly, as he's mentioned many, many times. It is hugely important now that local authorities do now get together, do decide who is going to take forward the strategic development plan in order to make sure that there's a greater distribution of people around the area. Otherwise, it's right to say that most of the development, I suspect, will fall on Cardiff, it'll fall on southern Caerphilly, and we need to make sure that a strategic development plan is in place to make sure that there is not overdevelopment in some parts of South East Wales, when in fact there might be opportunities elsewhere.
Cwestiwn 6, Dai Lloyd.
6, Dai Lloyd. Thank you, Llywydd. Will the First Minister outline the number of admissions resulting from chronic obstructive pulmonary disease to accident and emergency departments from 2016 to 2017?
Wedi'u Llywodraeth Cymru yn casglu data'n reolaidd ar nifer y derbyniadau adrannau damweinia ac achosion brif sy'n ymwneud â chlefyd rwystro cronig ar ysgyfaint, bynnag, mae gwybodaeth o gronfa ddata cyfnod.
However, information from the Patients Episode database indicates that there were 5,044 admissions in 2015 and 4,768 admissions in 2016, a fall of 5.5%.
Thank you for that. Of course, as you've mentioned, the data shows that there are more admissions to accident and emergency departments than has been historically, and there is a clear need to ensure access to rehabilitation services for these patients and also to refer them and support patients to take part in exercise. So what more are you doing as a government to ensure that patients across Wales have access to these treatments in order to reduce the risk of their condition getting worse and resulting in unnecessary referrals to A&E departments?
Well, may I say that a new pathway is being developed at the moment to assist people with COPD to consider activities in terms of exercise so that they can manage their condition. That means that they will need to have courses available so that people get the exercise that they require, people to teach them how to exercise and also to encourage them to exercise and to ensure that they look at new ways of managing the condition that they have rather than constantly feeling that they have to go to hospital. So I think that's where the work needs to happen. Angela Burns.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. And of course, First Minister, I'm sure you'll agree, it's not just a new pathway we need, but people with the passion and commitment to deliver it in a really proactive way. Just recently, I made it my business to go and meet Louise Warmby, who was this year's Royal College of Nurse of the Year, because Louise has in Cwmtaf developed an excellent programme for dealing with people with COPD. It's gained a lot of traction within Cwmtaf, and she's very keen to obviously spread that best message out across all of Wales because it is innovative, it is kind to the patient, and it really brings people on board in a non-hectoring, lecturing way. What can you do as a government to ensure that these very small green shoots that pop up in the NHS full of great ideas do get that opportunity to grow and to spread that best practice so that everybody can benefit from the experience of a nurse such as Louise Warmby?
You know, what I've found over the years is that quite often the best ideas come from an individual, who might observe what's happening in their local area, shape that observation into a practical example that can help people, and it's hugely important that that practice is able to spread. I would expect health boards to look at innovative practices elsewhere in Wales. I will, however, ask the Health Secretary as well to write to you with his ideas as to how this might be taken forward.
Question 7, McAnton.
Question 7, McAnton.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's strategy to tackle problem gambling?
Well, a cross-government group has been established to develop a strategic approach to reducing gambling-related harm across Wales. The group is currently considering the recommendations from the CMO's latest annual report and will coordinate existing action and identify new activity that might be required.
Thank you for that answer, First Minister. You will recall the number of debates we've had in this chamber over the issue of fixed odds betting terminals. And, of course, the UK government gave a commitment that they would now take measures to reduce betting on these to a maximum of £2 per bet. It now appears that it may be at least 2 years before any such legislation is forthcoming. We do have some powers within this, not as extensive, but it does seem to me that this would be an appropriate time now for Wales to take a lead and to introduce legislation at least to use the powers we do have to minimise the amount of fixed odd betting terminal bets that can be placed under our powers under the Wales Act of 2017 now, rather than wait for legislation which will take several years to arrive or may not even arise at all.
Well, the member is right. The difficulty, of course, is finding time for legislation. What is a packed legislative programme? That's not to mean we do nothing, of course. And it's important that we know that there are other tools available to us in order to reduce problem gambling. I can assure the member that the CMO has made several recommendations in his annual report. The cross-government group is currently considering them, certainly as a first step to dealing with problem gambling, and we're keen to work with the CMO in order to address the problem.
Darren Miller.
Diolch, Llywydd. First Minister, public health enemies, like problem gambling, are things that we have the opportunity to tackle here in Wales through the education system. There were some startling statistics at the Beat the Odds conference last week that 80% of children have seen gambling adverts on TV, 70% of children have seen gambling adverts on social media, and 2/3 have seen gambling adverts on other websites. Now, whilst I appreciate we don't have the opportunity to deal with adverts per se, we do have an opportunity through the education system to educate our young people about problem gambling and the harm that it can cause to them and wider society. So what action is the Welsh Government taking through the new curriculum and other opportunities which might be presented to tackle this problem as a public health enemy?
Well, I was explaining to my children last week that there was a time when cigars and tobacco were freely advertised on television, which they couldn't quite understand, but they were. Gambling was more tightly regulated. It's gone the other way. That's the problem. There is scarcely a time when somebody can watch a sporting occasion without there being some offer to make a bet halfway through the game, next scorer, you know. Even something I saw in the papers a few days ago where it would be a free bet if England won against Panama. A lot of losers there, I suspect. But the serious point is this. This has happened since the Gambling Act in 2005, and I regret that happened under the watch of my own party. I think that was the wrong decision to take, because what we have seen is the proliferation of gambling adverts that make it appear that you know, a bit of gambling is okay, basically, a bit of this, and then that's where the problems arise. What can we do in the education system? Because we don't control, obviously, the advertising industry. Well, health and emotional well-being is a theme of the personal and social education framework that forms part of the current curriculum framework that does give schools the chance to pick up issues such as problem gambling. Financial education will be a key element within the new curriculum, something, of course, that the member Bethan Said has championed, and that will offer robust provision to help learners develop their financial skills, including the management of money. And I can say that pioneer schools are working with some of the key organisations to develop new areas of learning as well. So, yes, we can address it through the education system. We are doing that. It's going to take more than that in terms of the advertising industry as well.
Jenny Rathbone.
I'm delighted to hear, First Minister, you're aware of the huge dangers there are in linking gambling to sport. You do not have to, you can support your team without having to place a bet. But obviously, children have been pushed this idea that the one goes with the other. What is the possibility of introducing legislation to change the planning criteria for betting shops so that they have a specific category, and that means that we can firmly control the number of new betting shops and ensure that other businesses closing down don't then get made into betting shops?
I'll ask the Secretary to write to you on that. It is right to say that we don't see a proliferation of betting shops, but that's part of the problem. You know, online gambling is it's never been easy to gamble. Yeah. You know, there was a time when you physically had to walk into a betting shop in order to do it. And you know, most people didn't do that. There were some people for whom it was a lifestyle choice, but it didn't happen for most people. Now, of course, because it's so easy to gamble, and because, for example, just to give some figures to members here, there were 152,000 adverts in 2006 related to gambling. In 2012, and I suspect the figure's gone up since then, there were 1.39 million. Well, that kind of barrage of information is bound to have an effect to encourage people who otherwise wouldn't have gone into a betting shop years ago to gamble more, and then, of course, to create problem gambling. If we don't allow advertising for tobacco and alcohol in TV, why do we allow advertising for gambling? I think that's a question for the UK government to resolve.
Diolch i'r Prif Weinidog.
Thank you, First Minister. The next item is the